Hi, this is Miss Park. We're going to do a very brief investigation on Desmos just before we begin our transformations of the parent functions. So I just go to desmos.com. So I'm going to ask you to do the same thing after you watch this video. Go to desmos.com and click on Graphing Calculator, and it'll open this. So if you haven't used Desmos before, this blue part where my cursor is where you type in an equation. And then there's all kinds of tools. You can zoom in and change. You can change the scale up at the top right. Down below, there's a keyboard. So if you want to do things like exponents or the radical sign, it's all through the keyboard. Okay, so you can just type whatever you want in here. So I am going to type, I want the equation y equals x squared. So the y is actually optional. You don't have to use the y. So right now it's y equals x, and when I add the exponent, I'm going to get y equals x squared. I could have just put x squared. So here's my parent. And here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to try and see what happens if I add a number to this at the end. So I'm not going to tell you, but you might know from last year what happens if there's a k value. So if you click on, when I just put in a variable like k, I could have put in like a 5. If I put in a k, it gives me an option to add a slider for k. A slider is something that allows you to change the value of k and see what happens when it changes. I'm not going to click it because I don't want to give it away, but put in a k, add the slider, and then change the value of the k using the slider and see what happens to the graph. I'm also going to ask you to type this in. So an h, remember h and k. Okay, and it'll ask you to add a slider for h. So let's figure out what it does. And you might remember that if we put the two things together, y equals x minus h squared plus k, we get this vertex form. Okay, now it had an a in it also, but for now we can leave out the a and just work with h and k. So what happens with these two graphs when I change the h and the k? When you're done that investigation, let's open a new, let's go to a new function. And this time I'd like you to try the radical function. So I'm going to open my keyboard, click on radical, and put an x in there. And there's the radical function. You can see it. There it is. I can scroll. Right, there's the radical function. And then I'd like you to do the same thing. So let's put the radical function plus a k and use the slider and see what happens. And also the radical function with an h, just like the parabola. Okay, so do that, see what happens. Okay, next one, we're going to do our last parent function, which is the reciprocal. So I can get a reciprocal by doing 1 and then the slash. So I'm just using my forward slash under the question mark, but it knows that that's a fraction. Okay, so here's my reciprocal function. That's what it looks like. I'll just add underneath that there's actually another part to the graph, which is the asymptotes. So I'm going to put them in. It's going to draw them in for me. Desmos doesn't automatically put the asymptotes. If you want to see them, you have to put them in yourself. So here you go. I've drawn the two asymptotes in. So now the next thing I'd like you to do is to add a k and with the slider and see what happens. And then, just like the other one, okay, and see what happens. And also, the next question is, what happens to the asymptotes when the k or the h are changed? Okay, so please do this little investigation, play around, give yourself a good 10 minutes or so to play around and see what happens with each of these things. Okay, good luck. See ya.